Hi, I'm Dr. John Neufeld, and welcome to Back to the Bible Canada. I'm doing a series on a number of the men and women of the Bible whose lives are exemplary to us and the lessons that we can learn from them. And today, I want to talk about a rather unique person in the Bible, and her name is Esther. So let me tell you a little bit about Esther. It's important, before we even begin, to say this. One of the most valuable lessons any Christian can learn is that God is absolutely sovereign. He rules over everything. Once you get that down into your heart and into your mind and can begin to see that in everyday events that God controls, the big stuff and the little stuff, that God is meticulously sovereign. Once you figure that out, it will revolutionize how you live your life, and you'll start to encounter God in everything. I say that as an introduction to Esther because that's going to make sense as we go along. Let me also just add this. One word that every single Christian should utterly banish from their vocabulary is the word luck. You're not lucky. You never have been lucky. God is sovereign over all things, and all things are according to His design. So get that into your heart, into your thinking, and we're ready now to begin with the book of Esther. Esther is an interesting book, and I want to give you a number of reasons why this book is unique in all the books of the Bible. Reason number one, this is the only book in the entire Bible that never mentions the name of God. He is not referenced one time in the entire book. So in a real way, it's kind of like a short story, and there's no mention of God. So what is the nature of the faith of the people that are mentioned here? Well, actually, we're not told. That's interesting. The second thing that makes Esther, I think, a unique book is that the characters, and here I'm referring most specifically to Esther. Esther, her character is developed in such a way that there are no evaluative statements that are made of her. That's unique because, you think about the other Bible characters. David, the Bible says he's a man after God's own heart, yeah? Or, when you think about the other book in the Bible that's named after a woman, and that's Ruth. And, we hear in Ruth, she has words of herself when she says to her mother-in-law, Ruth's a Moabitess, she's not an Israelite, but she says to her Israelite, her Jewish mother-in-law, "Your God shall be my God." She indicates her point of conversion. And then we meet a man by the name of Boaz who references her. And the Hebrew word is the word Hayil. "You are a woman of Hayil," he says. And Hayil is an interesting word because that's a word that was most often used in reference to warriors. So, a man on the battlefield who stands strong in the face of enemies, who doesn't wilt when he's, in the thick of battle, but is a hero, is called a man of Hayil. It's a man of honor. It's a man that you'd want to give a medal to. Now, Ruth wasn't on the battlefield, but the way in which she conducts herself, the honor, the integrity, the courage, there's an evaluative statement that's given by Boaz, and he calls her a woman of Hayil. She's an exemplary woman. There's no such statement about Esther in the entire book. What does the author of this book actually think of her? He never indicates. He never tips his hat one way or the other. And that leads us to think and wonder, how are we to think about her? And so that's a part of the drama that's here. There's a third thing that you need to also remember as well, and that is the book of Esther, interestingly enough, is only one of two Old Testament books that's never quoted in the New Testament. The other one is the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon. And then there's this one, which leads you to wonder, because, all of the New Testament preachers and writers, these were all people who had scoured through the Old Testament. What did they think of Esther? Well, we just never are told. She's just not mentioned. And that leads us to wonder, is there anything exemplary then to our own lives? What are we to learn from this book? And I think what we are to learn from this book is that God uses individuals to His own wise purposes. And we might be surprised by who God uses. So I'm going to come back to that theme, but try to keep it in mind as you think about it now. So with all that said, let's start to read. I'm reading Esther chapter 1 and verse 1. And so I encourage you, if you have your own Bible, follow with me and make sure you understand what's being said. It begins by saying, now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. India to Ethiopia, that's a huge stuff of land. So time to give a little bit of a historical background as to who this man actually is. If you read through the later sections of the Old Testament, you know that Jerusalem was defeated by the Babylonians. They burned Jerusalem to the ground, and they took most of the people of Jerusalem into exile, and they were now taken. The Jewish people lived in Babylon, and it was during this time when Jews were living in Babylon that you have these heroic stories of Daniel and his three friends. I mean, they're the guys that, refuse to eat non-kosher foods. They're the guys that refuse to bow to the king's idols. Daniel is the guy who won't bow to the king and is thrown into the lion's den. I mean, these are the guys that will risk their lives and readily die for their faith. So the Babylonian captivity is a time of great heroism and great faith, and individuals who will stand with their God, and they've come to realize that the God of Israel rules over Babylon. He's God over everything. So, that's what happens then. Then at some point in time, Babylon, the empire, is defeated by another empire, and this is the Persian Empire, and that's the context of Esther. So what we have in the Bible is that there is a man by the name of Cyrus the Great, and Cyrus the Great is the founder of the Persian Empire. Long before Cyrus ever became a human being, over 250 years before he came into existence, the prophet Isaiah already mentioned him by name, called him a signet ring in the right hand of God. God would do with Cyrus what he wanted. And it's true that when the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great defeated Babylon, Cyrus the Great issued an edict that allowed the Jewish people to go back to their homeland and to live there under Persian rule. So when you see the 127 provinces that stretch from India to Ethiopia, you've got to understand that Israel as a nation is under one of those provinces. That's where they now live, and that's the context of this story. Now we hear here is no longer Cyrus the Great. This is a man by the name of Ahasuerus, who is the grandson of Cyrus the Great. So time has passed. Many of the Jews have gone back to their homeland, but other Jews have chosen to remain in the various countries where they find themselves. So that's the context. Verse 2. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the capital of his empire, in the third year of his reign, so it's still young in his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media, so there's a Medo-Persian empire. The Medians also lend a hand to Persia and govern with them. The army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and the governors of the provinces, all 127, were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and splendor and the pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. That's a long period of time. Now just think about that. This guy is inviting all of the officials plus the military men of standing to come and see how great I am. So, this guy's a head case. You got to hear that. And so verse 5, and when those days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days. So this is the 180 days are now over, and I'm going to give one last hurrah. It's going to be a 7-day feast. So it's last 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, purple, silver rods, marble pillars, also couches of gold, silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And the drinking, was according to this edict. Oh, you say, there's a law about drinking. There's a law about everything. So here it is. There is no compulsion. Drink all you want, or don't drink anything. It's up to you. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. just to let you know how great I am and how lavish I am and how I'm willing to make the life of anyone who's my follower great. Come on to this and see what I can do for you. Now, verse 9, Queen Vashti, she's the royal queen, also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. So King Ahasuerus has got it for all the men. They're all the men of power. The women aren't in power at all. Queen Vashti, however, has a degree of power, but she makes sure she has a shadow banquet, if you will, also for all the women. These would be the wives of all the great leaders. So, verse 10, on the seventh day, so remember, this is, getting to the end of it now. The seventh day, the king was merry with wine. Yeah, he probably had a few too many. And he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zathar, and Carcas, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. I mean, the king wants to say, my wife, she's hot. And so I'm going to parade her in front of this large banquet hall, and everyone's going to see what she's got. And so half these guys, they're as drunk as the king is, and they're going to be leering at her. And here's verse 12. Watch this. But Queen Vashti refused to come. Now you stop here and say, this is unusual, especially in that day, even though she's queen, for her to refuse her husband's edict, who has the power of life and death over her. We're going to see that. So she says, I'm not coming. She says, not a chance. I'm not there to be leered at by all your male friends. You will have your banquet without me. And suddenly, you have a constitutional crisis. The leading men go to the king and they say, you can't let this stand. If Vashti gets away with saying no to you, then we're going to go home and our wives are going to say no to us. And pretty soon, women all over the kingdom are going to think that their voice matters. We can't have that happen. So please understand, this was a different day than our own. Again, you're having no evaluative statements being made here. It's just a statement of fact. This is how things were, and this is how things began to unravel. You have all sorts of men saying, we have got to put the women in this kingdom in her place, and there's only one thing to do. You've got to depose Queen Vashti. She can no longer be queen, and the minute that happens, the entire empire is going to look up and take notice, and every woman in the empire is going to know her place. End of story. Well, that's the beginning of the drama that's here. So that kind of lays the groundwork for the story that begins to happen. So I'm going to go now to chapter 2 and verse 8, because obviously there's not a queen. And so the king now has to do something. He's got to look around and find another queen. So I'm reading chapter 2, beginning at verse 8. It says, so when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed. And what's his order and his edict? Well, his order is that he's going to send his men, and they're going to go to all the places throughout his empire and find a series of the most beautiful young women in the entire empire. They're going to go into the king's harem, and they're going to be housed there. And they're going to be taken care of and given beauty treatments. And at the end of their beauty treatments, they get to go into the king. He's going to spend a night with them. And if he doesn't like them, he's going to send them back to the harem, and they're going to live there as a widow for the rest of their lives. Now, if everyone, you're thinking, oh man, they treated women terribly, but wait a minute, because they're not just treating women terribly. Watch this. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when the young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in the custody of Haggai. Well, we've already read about Haggai because he's one of the king's eunuch. Yeah. Now, the king not only is gathering women there, but he's got men to take care of them. And he says, well, I don't want men to take care of these beautiful women. Who knows what's going to happen? So he does what any king would do in that day. He simply has a number of castrated males, and they will be taking care of the women, so they won't have any sexual urges. So, he's ready to abuse men just as much as he's ready to abuse women. That's the nature of royal power in that day. When you're Ahasuerus, and you are the ruler ipso facto, the governor of everyone from India to Ethiopia, that's how you roll, man. And that's what he's doing. So here we get, that's the drama that we have. So it says, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman, that is Esther, pleased him and won his favor, and he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or her kindred. Now, she's a Jew. And this is so important in this story. For Mordecai, that's her uncle. We're not told about her mom or dad. And apparently she may have, lost her parents in some fashion. They probably both dead, and now she's in the care of an uncle. But her uncle commands her, don't let anybody know that you're Jewish. So food is provided. Is it kosher? I doubt it. All of the beauty treatments, is that in keeping with a woman of godliness as we find throughout the Old Testament? And the answer is, I doubt it. And what about that one night with the king? Well, you might say, well, if she doesn't do that, she's not going to survive. That's true. That's true. However, Daniel and his 3 friends weren't going to survive either. And they simply said, if the Lord is able to rescue us, and if not, we still won't bow to the king's idol. Let the king kill us. That was their act of courage. Whereas Mordecai says to her, don't let anybody know who you are. Keep it as secret as you can. So the question is not, what do you think about her? Or maybe that is the question. Truly, the Bible gives us no value judgment on what she's doing. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Nothing is said, just simply the telling of a story, because the highlight of the story isn't here. It's going to come up later. But it makes me want to roll back a little bit and ask the question about compromises, because compromises are made by people all the time. I know a number of people who, confessed faith in Christ and then decided that they wanted to get married to someone who didn't confess faith in Christ, and they're willing to make compromises simply to make sure that happens. I know of people who in their business knew what Christian principles were, but decided, I won't let anybody know about my Christian faith because it might get in the way of my business activities, and I don't want to be encumbered by that. I know of people in their leisure activities who have people who have the same hobbies or passions that they do, and all of that time have never let anybody know their own commitment in Christ simply because it gets in the way and they don't want anyone to know. So, this is the kind of thing that gets done all the time. And how you feel about Esther, whether she's a compromiser, after all, she's responding to her own uncle who seems to have authority over her, his request to say no, but she obeys him. Well, the Bible says nothing about it, just simply puts it there before us. So let's continue to go. And I'm going now to chapter 2, and I'm going to start reading at verses 16 and all the way through to verse 18. So if you have your Bible with you, just continue to follow with me, and I'll start at verse 16. And when Esther was taken into King Ahasuerus, into his royal palace, in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. So time has passed. That banquet that initially happened was in the 3rd year. It's now the 7th year. The king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces, all the provinces, 127 of them, all for a period of time got a remission of their taxes, and he gave gifts and royal generosity. In other words, everyone is supposed to say, wow, Esther, that's precious, and they were supposed to fall in love with her immediately. So he set her in a position of prominence very, very quickly. Well, that's, again, we're getting to the story, and if this was all the story that there was, we wouldn't, really have this story in the Bible at all, because more stuff is going to happen. So let's now go to chapter 3, beginning at verse 1. And here the plot thickens. It says, after those things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. So again, a note of explanation is required here. In those days, in order to make sure that all of the various nations that the king of Persia ruled over remained in submission to him. The king would make sure that various officials from all of the different cultural and nation groups that he ruled over had people from their own nation who were in positions of authority so that they could feel some sense of ownership in the entire empire. So they were proud of their part in it. And so this man, by the name of Haman, is also, in fact, he is given basically the prime minister of the country. The king rules, but next to the king, he is the most important individual. So who is he? Well, he's called Haman the Agagite. And anyone who knows their Old Testament quite well might remember that there is a man by the name of Agag, and Agag is an Amalekite. Just to let you know something about the Amalekites, I mean, we learn about them all the way back in the days of Moses, when Moses fought with them, and we read about that in the book of Exodus, and you might remember that account because that was the account where Moses kept his hands raised up over his head, and as he raises his hands, Israel wins the battle. So that's the battle with the Amalekites. We also know that there was a king by the name of Agag, whom Saul, the king of Israel, was to have killed, and he refused. And because he refused the Lord's command, Saul was removed from kingship. So if this man is an Agagite, we have to believe that his roots go back to King Agag, and an Agagite is someone within the royal family of the Amalekite people who are ruled by the Persians. And these Amalekite people are one of the key arch enemies of Israel. So if you're a Jew living in, the empire of the Persians, this is a very bad turn of events. This man would by nature hate you, and you, on the other hand, would by nature mistrust him and think only the worst of him. So that's where it is. And so that's the point that we have here. Somebody has come to the most important place outside of the king, and he is a hater of the Jews. Verse 2, and all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai, Mordecai, remember, he's the Jew, he's Esther's uncle. Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them, that is, Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. That's interesting. Mordecai says he's a Jew. Esther doesn't say anything. So it's fascinating to me. Now, of course, we continue to read, and when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. And as we continue to read, we come to the heart of the plot. Haman decides, look, it's not enough for me to simply kill this one man. I could do that and it would not have made the morning papers. Nobody would have cared. In fact, the king wouldn't even have given one inkling of concern about it. If he would have asked, he would have said, guy refused to bow, no problem, guy's dead, just like that. And so there it is. Here we see the drama. But so Haman says, I'm not satisfied with killing Mordecai. I hate his people. I hate the Jews. In fact, I'm going to put together a law that will require that every single Jew in the entire empire will be murdered. This is the beginning, that's the first attempt at a Jewish Holocaust. Haman, in fact, is a Hitler figure right here in the Old Testament who wants to eradicate every Jew on the face of the earth. I mean, you think about what would have happened if that should have happened. I mean, in fact, we would not have had a Messiah that came into the world. This is the great satanic plot to murder the Jews, of which Satan has continually and consistently done this. And so we continue to read. We come to chapter 4, and we're now reading at verse 4. It says, when Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her, and they're telling her that her uncle is dressed in sackcloth and ashes as a sign of mourning, the queen was deeply distressed, and she sent garments to clothe Mordecai. so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. And Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Murder all the Jews, I'm going to put money in the king's treasury. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the king and beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. In other words, he's saying, let him know that you're a Jew. Tell him, my people are going to be murdered. Fall on your knees in front of the king and beg for mercy. Now, you might say, it's a no-brainer. Just do it. And here's where everything pauses in this book. And at this point in time, you'd say, what? And you're looking at Esther and you say, you're on stage, sweetheart. I mean, go do your thing. And she decides, I don't think I'm going to do anything. And you say, well, is that really what happened? And yes, it is. So let's go back to our passage, chapter 4, beginning at verse 9. It says, and Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I've not been called to the king in 30 days now. So she's saying, I'm not going to go. I'm just not going to be there because I could lose my life. I mean, yes, he could hold out his scepter and invite me to come in, but if he doesn't, I'm dead and I'm not going. You say, Esther, if you don't go, your entire people, all the Jews are dead. That's what's at stake. You have to, at some point in time, stand on principle, make a stand, and she seems unwilling to do so. So then we come and we continue to read in verse 12, and they told Mordecai what Esther had said, and then Mordecai told them the reply of Esther, do you think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews? For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And that's where I'm going to basically stop. I mean, we know in the end that Esther does what her uncle tells him to do, and it turns out well. But before we even get there, let me make a couple of applications to this. I mean, application number one is what Mordecai tells Esther. He says, first of all, you won't escape either. See, here's the thing. There are times in our lives where we are called upon to make a stand, and the cowardly say, I won't make a stand, I'll save my life. Listen, cowardice does not save your life. In the end of the day, we're all going to die. You want to die with courage or as a coward? In the end of the day, that's what her uncle says to her. He says, you've got to recognize that your life will be counted as well as among your people. You won't be saved. Second thing that he wants her to know, deliverance will come from another place. And here we come as close as we can to seeing God's providence. Yes, God's not mentioned, but her uncle is very clear that God has a purpose for the Jews and he will deliver them. And the third thing he says, and who knows, but that you've come to the palace. All the stuff that you went through, the disappointment, the heartache, being torn from your family, not being able to live your life as a normal Jew, being put into a harem, spending that humiliating night with a king, and then suddenly being made the queen, and all of that stuff, everything that goes down with that, this all happened for this one moment. And that's where everything comes together in this book. And so here's the lessons that I think we should learn from Esther. This is what's exemplary from her life. Lesson number one. Esther's life teaches us that God's purposes will stand. They are unstoppable. Please understand that. Whatever we decide to do with our lives, whether we're going to act courageously or not courageously, understand that God's purposes will stand. You're going to have to decide where you'll be in the end of the day. You want to stand with God's purposes, Or do you want to run and try to save your own life and in the process lose your own life? See, that's the question that Esther asks us to ask ourselves. Lesson number 2, Esther's life teaches us that God will never allow his people to be destroyed or his promises not to be fulfilled. And here's the deal. The Church of Jesus Christ is created by God long after all the kingdoms of this earth fall. When Canada is no more, when the United States is no more, when the nations that you think of as great and unstoppable in this world are no more, the Church of Jesus Christ will still stand. God has placed his purposes behind his people. God's people will never be destroyed. And here's the question you need to ask yourself. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be with a people group that will be destroyed, or do you want to belong to the people group that will last for eternity? See, Esther's life asks us to question ourselves as to how and where we want to stand. The third thing we learn from Esther is this. Even if you've been a fence sitter for all of your life, and that's my evaluation of Esther. I know the Bible gives us no evaluation, but I tend to see her until this one moment as a woman who was easy making moral compromises to save her own life. And suddenly, she realizes she can no longer be in that place. Suddenly she realizes she's got to take a bold stand. She's going to walk into the king's throne room, and if it costs her her life, she's going to die for the sake of preserving God's people. See, that's Esther. Suddenly things change. She goes from being a compromised woman to being a woman of principle and of courage and being used by God to rescue his people. And there's a lesson for all of us. I don't know about you, but if you've been a compromiser for most of your life, ask yourself this question. Does that mean that I have to be a compromiser for the rest of my life? Or can there be that one moment where I say, no more compromises, no more 50-50 measures, no more I want to make sure I'm taken care of and who cares about the people of God? That ends today. It's time for us to look at our lives and say, I want to be a man or a woman who stands with God and who has courage to stand according to the principles that God has given me. Esther's life teaches us we don't have to live in defeat all of our lives. God can breathe his Spirit into us and give us a white-hot passion for the things of God and for the things of God's people. You can pray for that now and say, Lord, I don't want to be a compromiser anymore. I want to be one of the people of God. Do that today and read the book of Esther again and see a woman who is transformed to be everything that I think, if you know Christ, you want to be as well. Thanks for being a part of Back to the Bible Canada today. Thanks for considering some of the life lessons that we hear from the great men and women of the Bible. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching today, and I want to ask you to make sure that you hit the like button and also subscribe to this channel so that you can receive any further notifications of all the videos that we prepare for you. Thank you so much for being a part of Back to the Bible Canada.